Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. It's just 1 after 4. We're going to let everyone get in and get settled, and we are going to start right away. We have a jam-packed discussion today that I know that you will find extremely exciting, extremely curious. I think you're going to walk away with a lot of tips and tools. So come on, make sure you're all coming in. We've got two great presenters. My name, by the way, is Sharina Gibson. I am a senior data analyst and project manager consultant at Allergy and Asthma Network. I'm thrilled to welcome you to the webinar supported by ARS. As you'll see on the screen, two guests we're excited for you to hear from. First, Elisa Shapiro is a school nurse who also brings the perspective of a parent of children with food allergies, and Dr. Michael Pistiner, Director of Food Allergy Advocacy, Education and Prevention at Mass General Brigham for Children and Harvard Medical School. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping notes. Everyone is going to remain muted during the webinar so that we eliminate the background noise and we get to hear from our experts on the call today. But we will record and upload the session to our website later this week. Everyone will receive a certificate of attendance. We will not offer any continuing education credit for this webinar. And if you have any questions, although you are off screen and are muted, use the chat box or the question and answer box. We'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of today's webinar, where we'll open it up for Q&A. Also, at the end of today's webinar, it's very important to us because we value your feedback that you fill out the evaluation survey. We love hearing your feedback about how this webinar was, and of course, to get your input for future webinars. We've got 4:03, so I just want to jump in and go ahead and get us started today with our first presenter. Our caregiver presenter today is Alicia Shapiro. Alicia Shapiro is a school nurse, health coach, telehealth nurse practitioner, and mother of 2 children who lives in Enriquez County, Virginia. She has been a practicing nurse practitioner for 20 plus years and loves working with children and families with a holistic approach and practice. Both of her children have food and environmental allergies that they are managing with a variety of different treatment modalities. And of course, they have allergy plans at school. Elisa herself also grew up with food allergies. She has several years of experience as a pediatric nurse practitioner with expertise in patient education and collaborative care. Her background includes undergraduate degrees from Carnegie Mellon University and Virginia Commonwealth University. She's a licensed RN, and both as a mom and a school nurse, she deeply understands why we're here today, both segments of our audience, and she understands the importance of evidence-based tools to keep kids safe at school. Without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Elisa.
Thank you so much, Sharina. Well, speaking of evidence-based tools and advocacy that's been done, when I grew up with school with allergies, I never had an emergency action plan or any paperwork. I didn't even have an EpiPen, so we've come a long way. As mentioned, I do have 2 kids. One is more severe with her allergies, so she does have an emergency action plan and Epi that we keep at school. And I am a school nurse. So as you can see, I am back to work and we are getting ready for all the students to come back on Monday. So this is perfect timing and getting me up and running and getting all of my allergy plans back. I just met with a student who came in and brought hers. She's ahead of the game and brought it ahead of time. I met with a mother the other day. I love it when I can speak face to face with the kids. Sometimes they just drop them off, and I think I'm gonna try to make sure that I get to speak to everybody face to face because it really does help and keep this more as a real living document and not just, as we're going to talk about, a checklist that's done at the beginning of the year. I'm also in charge of training staff. So we've been working on best ways to do that. I work at a governor's school, so this is definitely a unique situation. We're a school for gifted children, and many of our kids do self-carry. They take care of themselves. And so in the past, they did not have a school nurse. So I've only been here for 5 years. The first time they've had a school nurse, they had a clinic aide. And we've been kind of working on how best to set up education. I had been doing it in person, and we're switching to an electronic way of getting this training out as well. And with new ways of giving epi, we're going to be having to obviously introduce and train teachers. So yeah, we're doing a lot of getting back to school ready, as I'm sure all of you are. And I, for my daughter, already got my paperwork filled in, and I need to drop that off and um, need to figure out timing. So I know it's always a juggle at the beginning of school. But I think by getting it on the books and making sure they have a standing appointment in the summer, that is the most helpful for me to make sure that I remember to get it all filled out and done. And I've had the baggie sitting and ready to go. Yeah, but I'm excited to be here and chat with you guys and um, share my perspective. And thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Elise, just a quick question for you. Could you tell us a little bit about your child's allergies?
Yeah, so she has an allergy to tree nuts and severe environmental allergies. That's actually the worst. So she has on allergy shots for that. And then when she eats cashews or pistachios, which is really unfortunate because I have tree nut allergy, but the opposite. So I'm walnuts and pecans and hazelnuts, and we're opposite. So we don't have nuts in the house. But yeah, so she usually reacts with an itchy throat. When she eats a nut and can verbally tell me when it's happening. So we have never administered epi for her. But usually, just like my allergies, she can tell right away if she has ingested something. So we catch it pretty early, and she never has had a lot. Her very first reaction was when she was 2, when I gave her a cashew, and that had a lot of vomiting and hives. But since I'm a nurse practitioner, my dad's a pediatrician, we did not bring her anywhere. We just monitored her closely. And luckily, it's never been as bad since. And with environmental allergies, that is actually the one I am quite scared of having a severe reaction to, which is um, why we started allergy shots, because she would get horrible coughing fits at night, and both her and my son's eyes would swell shut, and really significant pollen allergies in the spring. So that's pretty terrible.
And before we switch over to our next speaker, Elisa, could you just share a little bit about your working with the school nurse as a caregiver and some of your just a little bit about your experience working with the school nurse that will set the stage for what Dr. Pistiner will be talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So, my kids have now moved from elementary school into middle school. So I had the experience of working with both of them. And since they are still young, they do not self-carry. My son does not have an EpiPen. And so everything's kept in the clinic, and they've called me to make sure that all the paperwork was in and what was needed. She did have an experience one time at school where she had no idea what she ate, but she had an itchy throat. The nurse did give Benadryl, called me prior to giving anything else, and I spoke to my daughter, and we determined that she hadn't had any nuts. We weren't sure what it was. So we did not give anything else, but she did great after that and was able to stay at school after that itchy throat. And yeah, so we've had a good rapport. We also have a messaging system that the nurses at her school have been able to send me messages through. I don't have that at my school, so I have to rely on phone or just email.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing a bit about your perspective as a school nurse and also as a caregiver of someone with food allergies. And Dr. Pistiner, I'm now going to stop sharing and switch the mic over to you.
All right.
Our next presenter is Dr. Michael Pistiner, Director of Food Allergy Advocacy, Education, and Prevention at Mass General Brigham for Children and Harvard Medical School. He has extensive knowledge and experience in allergy and immunology, specifically as it relates to early introduction of foods, food allergy, and early recognition of anaphylaxis. Dr. Pistiner has a special interest in allergy management, healthcare provider education, facilitating collaboration between the medical home and the school, and maintaining the quality of life for children and their families. He's a fellow in the American Academy of Pediatrics, where he's a member of the Allergy and Immunology Executive Committee, the Council on School Health, and also the Massachusetts chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. He's also a member of a number of professional societies, and he serves on the Medical Advisory Board of Allergy and Asthma Foundation of America, the New England chapter, and is a volunteer consultant for the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. As if all of that wasn't enough, he is also the author of Everyday Cool with Food Allergies, the co-author of Living Confidently with Food Allergy Handbook, and the co-founder and content creator of allergyhome.org. Welcome, Dr. Pistiner. We're glad to have you here. We'll turn it over to you.
Thanks for having me. Is everything working? All right, good. All right, we are going to fly because we have a lot of information that we want to cover today. Um, can you all see my slides? All right, here we go. So navigating food allergies and anaphylaxis management in schools can be challenging. You guys have all seen it. It takes a well-trained team with good leadership. School nurses are the captains of the ship. They guide schools in safely managing food allergies and anaphylaxis to allow students not only to be safe, but also to learn and thrive. School nurses and others in school health services guide their schools to safely manage food allergies and anaphylaxis to allow students to have a good time, to be safe, and to learn. So this is a challenging mission, especially in areas where school nurse to student ratios are suboptimal. And clearly this mission of effective food allergy and anaphylaxis management can't be accomplished by you guys alone. So one person can't possibly manage a mission of this scope by themselves. You need a crew. So the crew, school staff, as well as other members of the school community will help you guys captain your ships. They'll be your eyes and ears. They will help you implement effective food allergy and anaphylaxis management. You need everyone on board. So here comes the myths and facts. Uncertainty can lead to answers or myths that are way scarier than reality. And myths can cause fear, divide teams, divide your crew, and can lead to mutiny. So for early day captains and crews, it was sea monsters and a flat earth. But for you guys, it's the uncertainty around food allergies. And so for modern day school nurses and school staff, it's common misperceptions that can lead to fear or anger, divide your communities, and can lead to a mistake that can cause an allergic reaction. So what can we do? We need to address and identify the myths straight on. We can replace them with facts, dispel these myths, and strengthen our teams and our missions. So it's our responsibility to use evidence and resources to educate and guide our teams, to place awareness, to replace the awareness or awareness with the uncertainty. So how do we do it? So many of you have heard me do this before, but the pillars of food allergy management, that takes a pretty complicated thing and kind of simplifies it. And so it's two parts. The pillars of prevention, preventing an allergic reaction, and the pillar of emergency preparedness. So these pillars together are going to drive procedures and interventions, protocols, and policies. Today, we're going to be focusing on the pillar of emergency preparedness. So now, to help support you guys with food allergy management, you're going to need resources. And so, two resources I'm going to push heavily on today. One of them is the American Academy of Pediatrics clinical report that was released last year, and the other is the Food Allergy Management in Schools recommendations, which was essentially a reboot of the 2013 CDC voluntary guidelines. That was released about 2 years ago. So that AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics Clinical Report, is going to be super useful for you guys when you're working with the students' healthcare team. So their medical home. So when you're getting a kid who's followed by pediatrics, family medicine, you name it, this will be a document that can help re-educate their clinicians and help you get the paperwork you need, the diagnosis you need. So this is going to be a great resource to know. And so I'm going to hit upon this. It goes through the principles, those pillars I was talking about. It goes through risk reduction, it goes through recognition and treatment, and it supports the need for having epinephrine available for both the unknown and the known. And we'll go through some of the details of this. Now, the FAM's recommendations, the Food Allergy Management in Schools recommendations from 2024, this is national level guidance, FAIR collaborated with the American Academy of Pediatrics with CDC funding to update the 2013 voluntary guidelines for the management of food allergy in schools. This reboot is a bit more concise, and this can be very useful to implement policies and protocols, and not meant to necessarily take every recommendation, but you can up your game. If you already have policies, then you can take it one level beyond. If you don't have policies, this is going to be great to utilize. Now, for some of you in some states that have guidance documents and guidelines, then that's wonderful. But in those of you who are in states that do not, this is going to be a great resource for you. Can I see through emojis? Is there anybody who is familiar with these? All right. And now thumbs down emoji. Is there anybody who's never seen this before? This is the way I'm going to communicate with all of you. Oh, yeah, there you go. All right, great. So this is going to be something we're going to share these links, the links for this and the American Academy of Pediatrics clinical report with you. All right, so let's get into it. So let's hit some of these myths. First myth that's going to take out both pillars is that only staff that directly work with students with food allergies need to be trained. And so, as you guys all know, everyone in the school building needs to be aware of food allergies and allergic reactions, and everyone needs to know their role in the school. This is supported in both that FAM's recommendation and the American Academy of Pediatrics clinical report. Ultimately, you're going to stratify the kind of training that you're going to give. So not everybody is going to have to know how to administer an auto-injector to a known, and certainly not everyone in a building may be needed to train to administer epinephrine to the unknown. So there's going to be different levels of training based on your local state regulations, and based on your own school resources. Now, the FAM's recommendations that I highlighted talks about some of the things that we're going to want to highlight and what you guys are going to want to include in some of those trainings. And I'm going to, so as far as prevention strategies, label reading, serving and preparing food, avoiding cross contact. Those are going to be some things in general that are going to be important to know, especially for certain roles like custodial staff. And then for those who are serving and preparing food, they're going to need specific training on label reading. But in general, being able to know some of the basics of food allergy, being able to recognize a potential allergic reaction, and then know their part in the school emergency protocol and know who to get. And that's going to be important. You'll want to train annually. You'll want to train new staff when they're onboarded. And when volunteers come in, you'll also want to train them. You're also going to have the third-party vendors who are working with your team. So you're going to have many schools have school nutrition services that are separate. You're going to want to make sure that they are trained. And many schools also work with transportation facilities that are also going to be have potentially their own training. You're going to want to confirm that they are trained, and then you'll want to potentially do your own training. Next myth. Food allergens to foods other than nuts are mild. As you all know, this is a myth, but this is not something that all staff or families or students are aware of. So it's important to know here that practically any food can cause an allergic reaction. And again, the kind of allergies that we're talking about here are IgE mediated. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but life-threatening reactions can occur with milk, egg, wheat, other foods as well. And so while the majority of reactions that are severe are coming from peanuts and tree nuts, you're going to see other severe reactions: shellfish, soy, sesame, finned fish, wheat, milk, and egg as well. And so taking all of these seriously is going to be important. Now, this is my plug to make sure you get the right paperwork and have the families check in with their healthcare teams to nail down the diagnosis. That's going to help you so much. So being able to differentiate a true IgE mediated allergy from other adverse reactions to foods or intolerances is going to be important. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about what anaphylaxis is later, but I'm just going to stop here and then quickly just this is some of the language that I use when I'm like training people and families, and perhaps some language that you can use to describe what an IgE mediated reaction is. All right, so IgE, immunoglobulin E, that is the protein that we have around in most cases if we're going to have a potentially serious, potentially life-threatening allergic reaction, and a serious, potentially life-threatening allergic reaction, anaphylaxis. It could be multiple systems. Now, in most cases, our allergy cells, mast cells, and basophils are involved, and they are preloaded with IgE, immunoglobulin E. If I were allergic to peanut and then that were to touch the IgE, which is bound to these allergy cells, that releases what's inside, causing the signs and symptoms of allergic reaction. So that's why I'm using the word IgE mediated food allergy here. So to get the diagnosis of an IgE mediated food allergy and to have that put on your paperwork is going to be very important, because that's going to be different than lactose intolerance. That is going to be different from eosinophilic esophagitis, from FPIES, from other non-IgE mediated issues, because the treatment for an IgE mediated allergy that becomes serious is epinephrine. And epinephrine is not used for the others. So this is where getting a diagnosis from the healthcare team, and in some cases an allergist is needed, is important. And that is what the AAP clinical report supports. Now, once you get that kid into that healthcare team, they're going to give the documentation that's going to be so helpful. And they'll give the medical authorization, and they will then give the appropriate epinephrine for the kid's size and age. And they hopefully are going to train the family and give them epinephrine that they could then turn into you. How am I doing so far, guys? Any questions or am I doing all right? All right. Thank you for the reassurance. Next
Doing
myth.
great.
I turned a plan in last year and nothing changed. So we can just use that one. So having that updated medical documentation is going to be important because things that happen are some of the kids get heavier and then they are going to need a higher dose of epinephrine. Some of the kids' epinephrine expires. Some of the paperwork, the different foods that were on their allergy action plan change. Some of the kids may start, and we're going to talk about this a bit before we get off today, but some of the kids might be participating in treatments for food allergy. This is all going to be stuff you need to know. So they're going to need to turn in paperwork that's up to date each year. All right, so next myth. It was only a mild reaction in the past, so we don't need an emergency plan. And so, again, I'm just driving this home the importance of that allergy and anaphylaxis emergency plan. But this document can change things for many of you. So, in many states, the treatment of a kid with a known allergy is going to be on a different protocol than of an unknown first time. And so this documentation, this action plan really is going to be an important document that you then can use to train your unlicensed assistive personnel to increase their confidence and also help them appropriately treat this kid. Now, the American Academy of Pediatrics via the clinical report, but also separately, they have an action plan that was vetted by National Association of School Nurses. And this plan, what's nice is that if you fulfill criteria for needing epinephrine, then you're treated with epinephrine, I'm sure. And then I guess give me some poop emojis if any of you guys have gotten action plans that say give Benadryl first. Anybody? I'm glad no. All right. Nobody's brave enough to throw the poop emoji down. All right. And so you're going to want these action plans to be not only given to you guys, but it's great for these action plans for the families, sometimes for the adolescent to have it, and then any of the coaches. So you're going to want to remind them if they turn this into you and you get the sense that this is the only one they have, make sure that they download multiple copies. And then sometimes they can put it in their kids' auto injectors, their kids' intranasal epinephrine, fold it up, get it in there so it's with that kid at all times. And then you guys have your copies. Now, you're going to need to be thinking about FERPA, but then any of the staff that's going to be taking care of the kids, and they may be these unlicensed assistive personnel that you train, they're going to need that as well. So these allergy and anaphylaxis action plans can then be used as medication authorization, but then you guys can then use it as the basis for the individualized care plan, right? And so this is a very efficient way to get that needed paperwork going. A lot of busy clinicians may not want to sign tons of stuff. That action plan, though, you can use it and leverage it and then use it towards your school health plan. The FAM's recommendations also support the stuff I'm talking about here. You could check that out. I'm not going to spend too much more time on it. All right, another myth. The cafeteria is the riskiest place in school. Truth is, classroom is where the majority of allergic reactions are happening. And so, in survey, and this is a kudos and a plug to the Massachusetts school nurses who have been collecting mandated reporting and data for over a decade now. And their data was what ultimately showed that the majority of allergic reactions is not just happening in the cafeteria. We need to be thinking about all places of the building. So when you're thinking about your emergency protocols for the known and the unknown, you need to be thinking about everywhere. So 47% in the last available data that Massachusetts had from 2023. 47% of allergic reactions initiated in the classroom, 23% in the cafeteria, 6% in the health office, 4% playground, outside, recess, and other locations also had reactions. All right. Another myth. We can't afford a full-time school nurse. So, data has shown that school nurses save districts money. And so the cost of a school nurse is less than the cost of teachers doing school nurses' jobs and pulling them. Also from the parents' lost time. So school nurses save money. If there are schools without, then this is a great talking point for school boards and such. All right, so I am gonna pass on the pillar of prevention for now. And sometimes the pillar of prevention does break down. Again, that's going to be avoidance strategies, label reading, cross contact, excellent communication. Now, as far as emergency preparedness, there are myths that get in the way. Now, again, thinking about preparation for the known and the unknown is going to be really important, and taking a look at those specific chapters and sections of the FAM's recommendations and the American Academy of Pediatrics clinical report is going to be important. And staff training is key. For those who go back to the webinar, I just wanted you to see these slides, but I hit upon a lot of these points. All right. And we'll bring up some of them as far as training for the unknown versus training for the known. The certain states are going to have specific training requirements for unlicensed assistive personnel to then administer epinephrine to children with a known allergy who have now turned in the paperwork, are known to the school. And if they were to have a serious allergic reaction, it fulfills criteria, then unlicensed assistive personnel who are trained can then administer epinephrine. Different regs in different states are then going to cover stock epinephrine, undesignated, for people who are unknown to the school. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. All right, next myth. All anaphylactic reactions have skin findings. Not true. 10 to 20% of anaphylactic reactions have no skin findings. It's important to drive this home in your staff training and for you also to know that. And along with driving home that epinephrine is first line for a serious allergic reaction. Now, relatively new definition and statement were published on anaphylaxis recently. And so this consensus report that came out has a definition of anaphylaxis that changed just a touch. Anaphylaxis is a serious reaction that can progress rapidly and may cause death. It may involve the skin or mucosa, which includes lip and tongue, respiratory, lungs, breathing, cardiovascular, heart, blood pressure, or GI, stomach, gut systems. Life-threatening anaphylaxis is characterized by respiratory and or cardiovascular involvement and may occur with no skin or mucosal involvement. And so that is an important thing that some people in the community, some people in the school community may not recognize an allergic reaction if skin findings aren't involved. That's where a school protocol, that's where training with action plans is going to be really important. That's where having protocol for the unknown and extra training there is going to be important. So again, we have the different systems. Now, many of the action plans, and so while I just keep firing home at the American Academy of Pediatrics allergy and anaphylaxis plan, others are acceptable as long as epinephrine is the treatment for anaphylaxis. FAIR has a very similar plan. It has some figures and illustrations that some people do like, and they appropriately use epinephrine for the signs and symptoms needed. And essentially, things just to think about and to organize. These days, allergists and other clinicians are saying to our families in the community setting, if the child has a likely exposure and then they have more than one system, then treating with epinephrine may make sense. Looking at that action plan, more than one system with a potential trigger, then even if they're mild symptoms like hives around the mouth and excessive sneezing, hives around the mouth may be mild, but more than one system is a light bulb for maybe this is early anaphylaxis. And so this is where these action plans are going to help with some of this decision making. Now, with a potential trigger and even one system, but a severe symptom like the kid eats their allergen and now they're coughing, the action plans will say, go ahead and treat with epinephrine. And so get used to those action plans. Make sure that they are accurate. If there's like a one that comes in that doesn't make sense and says antihistamine first, push back and then share the AAP clinical report, push back and share the AAP action plan. All right. So again, I just kind of set myself up here. The other myth is give antihistamine first. No, 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 no. Epinephrine is the treatment of choice for anaphylaxis. Antihistamine is comfort medicine. In fact, diphenhydramine, Benadryl can schlag a kid, make them tired. In the younger ones, it might be hard to assess mental status. And again, the antihistamines are comfort medicine. If you see an action plan that says give antihistamine first, give that action plan back, and you can then suggest that the AAP action plan or the FAIR action plan be used in its place. All right, so as far as epinephrine devices, it's a common misperception that the auto-injector needle is huge. But if you hold one of these bad boys up for a kindergartner and you ask them how long the needle is, many will think it is the length of the device. If it was that case, I would cry and run away too. And so being able to share with our families, our students, and our teachers that actually, it's actually quite short. So the 0.15 auto-injector doses, they're all about half-inch long, and the 0.3 is about 3/4 inch long. This is shorter than the width of a dime. It is not even close to the length of the device. So that is reassuring information. Now, currently we have multiple epinephrine delivery systems available. We have auto injectors and we have intranasal. And so this is going to be where figuring out how you train your staff who now are going to be for the known, if you're using the kids' epinephrine, then the staff are going to need to be trained on the epinephrine that the kid has available in school. And then for stock, you're going to need to train your staff on the available stock that your school has available. Now, the intranasal is relatively new to town. It's been around for less than 2 years. And the studies have been showing that it works as well as the intramuscular, that it has very similar properties in the way it works. And so some people are quite happy that now there is no longer the need for a needle answered epinephrine and that this is needleless. One of the things to keep in mind is this, that I try to deal with needle phobia. I'm very happy to offer intranasal epinephrine. And so really for me and for allergists, really the epinephrine that you use is the epinephrine that you need. And so any epinephrine that is used for treatment ultimately works. But in a kid or a family who's a little afraid of needles, the first thing I try to do is deal with needle phobia and help them understand how short it is. And because in some instances and cases, if the only available epinephrine is the IM, then it's going to work great. And we don't want a kid to get really upset or scared if that's the only available stock. And so that's one of the things that we'll want to drive home. And I think that I am starting to run out of time, aren't I? All right. So we got new delivery systems are coming soon. There's going to be a sublingual that's coming shortly. And so the point here is you guys are going to need to train your staff. So you guys are going to need to reach out to resources to get trained so you could train. So we need to train the trainers. So you'll be reaching out to Allergy Asthma Network for more information about some of this stuff. Now, I am going to, if I can just have 4 more minutes, I'm going to motor through some of this and then get us to our discussion. And so also, it's also a myth that only students are going to have an allergic reaction. And so in some school buildings, visiting staff and local staff have it. In Massachusetts, the data shows that a significant amount of people are not students who need epinephrine. And about 25% of the people who need epinephrine are not known to the school. And so there it ranges 20 to 25% depending on the year. But that really drives home the importance of stock epinephrine. We talked about that. One myth is that having stock epinephrine is a liability, but we would say actually the fact is that not having stock epinephrine is a liability, especially with what is known and the easily availableness of this all. And so the FAM's recommendations talks about stock epinephrine and preparing for emergencies for known and unknown, as does the American Academy of Pediatrics clinical report. We are also going to share with you resources for if you don't have stock epi, how do you do it? The Quad AI, the Allergy Society, has a toolkit to help schools stock epi and get prescription orders. And so that's going to be an important thing for you to think about if you don't have it. And all right, I'll pass driving skills back over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Pistiner. That was great. Lots of wonderful, great information. And now we're going to just take a few minutes to have some dialogue with both of our lovely presenters with some questions that we frequently hear from caregivers or school nurses, some of which were coming up in the chat during the conversation today. So, speakers, here's the first discussion topic that we're seeing from questions that came up today that we heard from before is around those IHPs, 504 plans, and the food allergy or anaphylaxis emergency plans. So, starting with you, Dr. Pistner, what would you want school staff and not just nurses, school staff in general, to understand about why these plans need to be so easily accessible, especially given how much the requirements can vary from one state to the next? And also, why would that be important for parents as well? We've heard from school nurses that they usually receive sometimes confusing information as it relates to what they hear from the parents. Here's this paperwork from whichever clinician, I know I have to turn it into you, and then they don't think about it again sometimes. So could you answer those questions about that?
All right. So from my take, that a well put together allergy and anaphylaxis action plan does a lot. And so it can be the medical authorization, It could be excellent communication for the parents. So a good resource in the middle of an allergic reaction for them to actually follow, like a recipe for when they would give their kid epinephrine. It can be used for the parent to train grandma, the coach, another parent when you're passing off responsibility of the kid. And on it, it talks about the medication that it comes with. It has the contact information for the family. And so it's an awesome tool to educate and communicate. And then it also gets the job done from a medical authorization part. And then it also can be used by the school to initiate an IHP or a 504 if needed.
Following up on that, because we got a questions about that IHP and 504 questions asking, is both necessary? Does one come before the other? Could you answer that, Dr. Pisner? And then Elisa, would you also talk about how you work with both very quickly? Go ahead, Dr.
Then
Pisner.
the AAP clinical report does a nice job talking about this, but you guys, through your resources with NASN, you got this from the IHP perspective and how to fill out an IHP, individual health plan. This is going to be a little different from the 504 because a 504 is ultimately a legally binding document. And so, in cases that a school with its current policies or state guidelines are unable to accommodate the needs of a particular student, and this sometimes is more of an issue in a school that doesn't have a school nurse, right? Or imagine a school with multiple buildings and there just aren't grown-ups who seem to be available or trained. Then this is where a 504 is going to be really useful to be able to make sure that all the things that the guidelines, all the things that the FAM's recommendations recommend can be done. So in cases where there isn't this working policy protocol, where there aren't the resources that would be able to operationalize and use an IHP, then that's where a 504 is going to be really important. So now there's going to be some places, some cities, some areas where they just automatically do a 504, and it's more templated based on the protocol of the school. And this is going to be based on your state, your city. But many states like Massachusetts, since there are guidelines and protocols and IHPs that have been so effective, then those are working.
Great. Elisa, anything
Yeah.
you want to add
So,
to that?
in my experience as both a parent and a school nurse, the emergency allergy and anaphylactic plan has been what we've used. We have not had any 504s at our school for this purpose. And our paperwork does include a good amount of information. And since we're a high school with gifted kids, we also have most of our kids self-carrying. So we also have a doctor signing a paper saying that they're able to self-carry. And so it's pretty complete for allergies for what we have here. And I was just thinking about it and in the individual health plan, how that might be really helpful for someone who is on biologics, and allergies might be shifting and changing as it can be kind of reviewed intermittently. But typically, we are just using this plan and not using a 504. Whereas for our diabetics, they almost always have 504s, and that becomes important too because a lot of them are using cell phones, which are now not allowed, and we need to have that documented in a legal form that they can use it. But typically, we don't need that with the allergy kids.
Okay. Next question for you all.
Are we going to get to talk about self-carriage and self-administration?
Absolutely. That was actually one of the next questions.
Oh,
So
Lord,
please jump
let
right
you ask
in.
it. I ruined it.
It's okay. Go ahead. Jump right on in. And
Can I
we'll
share
take
my
one more
screen in a
question.
sec?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm cheating. I'm getting in slides that I ran out of time for. Yeah, so this issue of self-carriage, and so it is also a myth that if a kid can self-carry and self-administer, that it's their responsibility. So that's the thing is, and both the AAP clinical report and the guidelines say that even if we're having a kid, like an older kid who's developmentally ready and prepared to self-carry and self-administer, we can't expect that these teenagers are going to be able to pull this off. Some kids, like kids I know very well, might be knuckleheads and they might forget their auto injectors. They might not have them on them. They might also be a kid who gets a little worried in the middle of a reaction and may not be able to do it. So school needs to be there for backup. And ultimately, it's the school's responsibility to have the epinephrine and to treat that student, even if it's like a 17-year-old. And so, as far as self carry, as you guys have seen, then you can have a kid who might carry a bag or a fanny pack that might have their epinephrine delivery system in there, and it goes with a kid. This is going to be something to consider in a kid who's moving around multiple areas of the building. And then this way, facilitating that, or if it's a building that doesn't have epinephrine like in a nurse office that is close by, then considering self carriage makes sense. But we wouldn't have the younger kids self administering because what comes with self administering is being able to recognize an allergic reaction and then be able to administer. And so that takes an older kid than the kid who could just carry a bag around.
Yeah, and with the paperwork that I submit to the teachers where I take this allergy action plan and turn it into a document for them, it's sort of listed more so we know where the epinephrine is located. I, of course, do have stock epinephrine, and some kids have both. Some kids have it on them and one in the clinic. And so I would document that so that each teacher knows just sort of where it is, but not as much that, the kid would always give it. I did have one student who has given her own epi multiple times. So she was super mature and could verbalize that and have conversations with her teachers independently, so they knew what to expect. But most of the time, we are expecting just to know where it is, and then we would be there to assist and do what needed to be done.
Awesome. Thank you.
And the
Last
checkoff
question for you
boxes on
all.
that
Oh,
AAP action plan for self-carriage and self-administration are on there as well. And then that
Mm-hmm.
takes like the
Oh, yeah.
scene of the
Mhm.
clinician, the family, school health, and the kid. And so when everybody's emotionally prepared and ready for this, then that's something that can work.
Yeah.
that leads me right into the last question. And this was sprinkled throughout questions we received beforehand and in today's chat. So, final thought from you, Dr. Pistiner, and from you, Elisa. What's one tip that you have for closing the communication loop, for having the parent, caregiver, school nurse, and clinician working together to support the student based on what we've talked about today? One tip or trick that you use?
I think just having that trying to have a conversation personally, either in person or on phone with each family, um, so that, I know that they know that I have received it, that we're ready to act, that we have the information correct. A lot of times it's also not specified, and I would like to update this, whether they have airborne reactions or not. I've been just sending around, no nuts in the classroom if they have nuts to everybody, but I'm trying to ask now specifically if it's only a reaction only with ingestion or also with airborne. So that we know that. So it's just really helpful to have that conversation and in-person communication.
Thank you. And Dr. Pistner, what's your hack, tip, or trick, hot tip for that triangulation of people that surround that student?
That collaboration between the school health, the family, and then the medical home and the healthcare team. And so I love talking to school nurses when we got to figure out how we can make a challenging situation work. If and when there is more of a need than just the standard paperwork, which already facilitates this communication, right? Then being able to be open to working together to support that kid is going to be really great. And then working with the parents and giving the parents that impetus to try to facilitate this partnership.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you both so much for sharing your time and your expertise. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. I hope those tips right there, a lot of questions about what if the clinician says this and the parent says that, and vice versa. There are variations of that. So I hope you heard clearly today, if nothing else, that the school nurse, the parent, and also the clinician, as we've seen here today, are open and eager to have that conversation. So pick up the phone, shoot an email, whatever we have to do so that that paperwork is a living guide for quality outcomes. Thank you again, Elisa. Thank you again, Dr. Pistiner, for such a valuable conversation today. Thank you to everyone for joining us on the call. Before you go, please take a moment to complete our evaluation survey. It's right there in the chat. We'd love to hear your feedback and any ideas you have for us for future webinars. And also want to let you all know that our next webinar is Your Asthma, Your Health, Making Informed Decisions About Vaccines. And that will be held on September 3rd at 4 p.m. Eastern. We hope to see you all there. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.